Welcome to Sports101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here we'd like to expand our conversation to include history in the past, present, as well as in the making, and we also look at the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Before the show, follow me on social media at Coach_Harp412 and on Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please get social with Sports101 and then litany other shows of SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZoneCHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, SportsZone Chicago is the world's only Black-owned sports talk app. You can listen to my show, Sean and Maya in the Morning, the flagship show, or any new shows such as SportsZone Chicago Late Night. You can keep up with breaking sports news. If you miss something, don't worry about it. Just go to YouTube and search SportsZone Chicago. Please subscribe to the page. Now, after you subscribe to our page on YouTube, we need everyone, and I mean everyone, to download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now I'd like to introduce you to the topic of this week's episode. Fear the J-Hat. Jackson State football recruiting. Excuse me. So you right here, you see the J-Hat, and that's coming from this Twitter page right here that was created to say fear the J-Hat. Now you see right here, now where did that come from? This is talking about how the predominantly white institutions or PWIs feel now that Jackson State is having such advantage in its recruiting and particularly getting top 10 picks in the ESPN 300. So what people are saying is when you see this J-Hat on the table, that, you know, you're losing somebody and then you're getting a lot of outrage, such as the Florida State fans that were disparaging Travis Hunter, burning his jersey, things like that. People are claiming that Coach Prime is paying for these student athletes through the NIL deals. There are a lot of rumors coming associated with the J-Hat. The one thing that's not true was that he is paying these players, but let's say hypothetically he was. What were these other schools doing before the NIL bill was passed? If you know about anything about collegiate athletics and particularly football, there's a lot of underhand things that went on in the past. So again, why was a Twitter page made? Since integration, the top Black athlete has shunned HBCUs for more lucrative opportunities. What people don't realize is these lucrative opportunities came about due to the influx of Black players in the late 1960s. Remember, think of it from this perspective. If these same Black players would have stayed at HBCUs, then those schools would have seen the same boom in facilities that the larger schools did and what they used in the 70s and 80s up until present day to attract the top talent. Theoretically, if that type of paradigm shift occurred and top HBCU players went back home to HBCUs, then those schools will be the best in football. Why do I say that? Because if you look at the percentages, if major college football is around 80-85% African-American, again, if you did see that paradigm shift occur and all these student athletes went back home to where they could play before integration, then the same thing will happen. You have your Gramblings and your Tennessee States, your North Carolina Centrals producing athletes that go to the NFL, the NBA, and the Olympics. For a very long time, most major college football programs didn't want anything to do with Black college players or Black athletes in general. UCLA was the rare exception as they boasted a backfield in the 1930s of Kenny Washington, Woody Strode, and one of the best running backs they say ever came through UCLA. You know him from playing baseball. His name was Jackie Robinson. Please look up any film you can find on Jackie Robinson playing football and watch him at tailback. You could put him in the game right now. He'll get 175 yards running and about 75 receiving. And that was in the late 1930s. So even up until the 1950s and 60s, the majority of major college football was segregated. If you look at the year 1959, Alabama was set to play Penn State in the Liberty Bowl. The University of Alabama's president and his board of trustees got together and they threatened to boycott the game because Penn State had black players on the team. Now we can go into the 1970s where the Crimson Tide, led by Bear Bryant, played USC, whose star player was Randall Cunningham's older brother, Sam Cunningham. The head coach at the time, again, Paul Bear Bryant, he allowed 7 black players to try out due to public scrutiny in 1967, but none of them made the team. Bryant later said the administration or the fan base wouldn't even stand for an integrated team, so essentially they had no chance. And this was the par for most of the schools at that time. There were some Southern schools that had signed black players, but as late as 1966, half the schools in the SEC and the Southwestern Conference, which is now defunct, that's where SMU, Oklahoma used to play. It was before the Big 12. They had integrated their student bodies. The SEC still had no black players. The Southwestern Conference, they finally broke its ban when SMU and Baylor began recruiting black players, but again, the SEC still hold out. That ultimately changed after that game where Sam Cunningham showed out on the field and USC beat the brakes out of Alabama in Tuscaloosa 42-21. Everyone, it was a classic statement that Bear Bryant used to say. He wouldn't recruit a black player until he needed one. And obviously after that win, wanting to stay on top, he needed some. In the end, for competitive reasons, those who blocked the calls for integration or segregation backed down, and Alabama, as well as the rest of the SEC, began to integrate. But again, originally there was no black players in the SEC. So at this time, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the FCS conference, that leads the FCS in attendance, the historically black, or one of the historically black FCS conferences. The other is the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, or commonly known as the MEAC. At that time, the Southwestern Athletic Conference was the SEC because, again, the SEC had no black players. And right now, the SEC is about 85% African-American. Before that, in the absence of these opportunities, African-Americans found different ways to succeed by playing at the schools that wanted them, not only as a student, but also as not only as a student athlete, but as a student as well. Historically, black colleges and universities have been playing football since the late 19th century. Remember, the first game was between Johnson C. Smith. It was known at that time as Biddle Institute and Livingstone College, my current employer. And they were able to bring some of the greatest talent ever seen to the game. Again, at this time, the major Southern programs insisted on institutional racism, and particularly the SEC, and the HBCUs were able to recruit and benefit from the talent of these great athletes. So you have individuals such as Jerry Rice right here, who played at Mississippi Valley. He's an all-time leader in career receptions in the NFL, receiving yards, and career touchdowns. You have Michael Strahan, who played at Texas Southern. He held the record for most sacks in a single season. And then right here, you have Bullet Bob Hayes. Now, Bullet Bob Hayes was special because he's the only man ever to win a Super Bowl and an Olympic gold medal. And he is, again, Bullet Bob Hayes, a wide receiver out of Florida A&M University. And last but not least, and these are just 3 trailblazers. There's so many more, but I just want to show these 3 trailblazers who trailblazed in the NFL. This last one, obviously, is the namesake of the NFL's most prestigious honor, the Walter Payton Award. Sweetness himself, Jackson State's own Walter Payton. Now, there's also a list of HBCU Hall of Famers who played in the league, and that's so long, so I just wanted to highlight those 3. Remember, nearly 10% of the players in the Pro Football Hall of Fame came from historically black colleges and universities. That's amazing, given to the relatively low number of players who are allowed to break into the NFL after their college success, given the institutional racism at the time. So just think, if there was no barriers to entry, that number would be drastically higher. The NFL banned black players from 1934 in night all the way up to 1946, and then again as late as to the mid 1950s. A number of NFL teams wouldn't even send scouts to historically black colleges and universities, even though they were aware of the talent available, and particularly what the American Football League was doing. In 1959, in the NFL, black players accounted for about 12% of NFL rosters, and the floodgates opened on that. And I just spoke this reference up, was the formation of the American Football League in 1960. The American Football League, they used a passing style that was more conducive to HBCU football, which was wide open at the time. Remember, the West Coast offense that Bill Walsh said he created. If you ever read his book, he says he took the passing game from Archie Gunslinger Cooley at Mississippi Valley. And similar to Bill Walsh, the AFL was all about passing. If you look at the first Super Bowl with Joe Namath guaranteeing the victory over the Colts. The Colts were a ground and pound team. They were under center. The Jets at that time did play a little bit under center, but Joe Namath would drop back and throw the ball around everywhere. And that style of play was synonymous not only with the AFL, but historically black college football, who wanted to spread the ball out and take use of his athletes and their speed. The Lou League, the AFL didn't have a ban on quotas, and the team signed the best players regardless of color. There was a historian who documented this in his research named Charles K. Ross, and what he stated was there was 173 black players who played in the NFL between 1946 and 1962, and 42 of them came from historically black colleges and universities. And then he also said from 1946 through 1960, no player from an HBCU was selected higher than the fourth round. And again, oftentimes we know that's due to institutional racism. In 1963, things began to change, and the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs became the first professional football team to select the player number one overall from an HBCU when they drafted defensive lineman Buck Buchanan from Grambling State University. The NFL did not see fit to select Buchanan until the New York Giants picked him in the 19th round. So again, the NFL was still using the same tactics that they do today. They would take players from smaller schools, not just historically black colleges and universities, and pay them lower. So their first contracts will be lower, and they have to get their money on their second contract, which makes them rely on longevity and health and other things where some people are getting cashed out at the beginning. That's vital because the NFL career for most people is around 2.5 years. So again, you see the institutional racism through the NFL. The NFL was going to let him play in the NFL, but they wanted to draft him in the 19th round, so they wouldn't have to pay him as much. And obviously the Chiefs took him with number one overall. The AFL, again, due to its style of play, began to grow and finally became competitive with the NFL, which was the older, more established league at the time. And the NFL had to take a look at itself in the mirror and understand the racism that they were doing that kept some of the best players from the NFL. Remember, this is before the merger, so there were two separate entities. Now, fast forwarding to today, there was such a long road from this 12% that were in the NFL back then. Now when black players compose up to 80% of the NFL rosters, and we know there's still a fight in regards to administration and the coaching and ownership as well as management ranks within the NFL. But going back to it, and we look to the crux of this, it was the HBCUs who held and fostered and perfected so much Hall of Fame talent, while the bigger and more established schools turned away these players of color. Again, that makes you question, once you look at all things and unpack them, knowing what we do now, why is there such a greater movement back to the HBCUs? One thing that we can do to help that is get our businesses, and any business that wants to contribute to make a multi-million-dollar weight room or locker room facility. You got to play when in Rome. You got to play like the Romans do. And that's what it's taken to get these top athletes. So all schools, regardless of your makeup, should be striving to do that. Again, these historically black colleges and universities built a bridge that the players needed at the time. And the list of players who competed at those schools because they had no other options is transcendent, and it's so long. There's so many players. So in mine, Black History Month is, coming up. We're going to talk about some of these great players who played at historically black colleges and universities. If you're not familiar with this history, some of these names may surprise you. Hopefully everyone is. And again, this is just a small sample. The list is so long, but I just wanted to give you a brief synopsis. So right here we have Art Shell, who was also a head coach of the Raiders. Art Shell was an offensive lineman from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Next, we have Jackie Slater. He came out in the draft after Walter Payton from Jackson State. When Walter Payton came out, remember, that was the last time where there was multiple people from historically black colleges and universities drafted in the top 10. You had Walter Payton and Dr. Doom, Walter Brazil, a linebacker that both got selected from Jackson State in the top 10 of the NFL draft. And he also had an individual from Grambling State. So the next year, their star offensive lineman, Jackie Slater, came out, and he had an all-pro NFL career. Our next is the late, great Steve McNair, root to the Qs. Steve McNair was a legendary quarterback at Alcorn State. He was in running for the Heisman at one point during his senior year. And again, he had a stellar NFL career as well. Came 2 yards away from winning the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, he's not with us no more. He's resting with the ancestors. So big shout out to the bruh, Steve McNair. Next, we have our favorite sports commentator, Shannon Sharp. Shannon Sharp was a Hall of Fame tight end from Savannah State, whose most notable years come from the Denver Broncos and Baltimore Ravens. Moving on, we're going to talk about Mel Blount. Mel Blount is a 4-time Super Bowl winner at Southern University. One of the trailblazers at defensive back, being around 6'3", 6'4". Mel Blount, after his career, he retired and focused on youth, setting up a youth home in Western Pennsylvania. His son, Jabri Blount, was an all-MEAC basketball player at my alma mater, North Carolina Central University, who, after his basketball career, last season signed a free agent contract with the Miami Dolphins to play tight end. All right, Chicago, you'll love this one. You got defensive end Richard Dent on that vaunted 85 Bears defense. Richard Dent is a defensive end from Tennessee State and is a Hall of Famer as well. Next Hall of Famer will be Harry Carson, a middle linebacker from South Carolina State. He played on those defenses with Bill Parcells and the young Bill Belichick when they had Lawrence Taylor, Pepper Johnson, old school defense where you really had players like you probably couldn't control. Now we got the great Doug Williams, the first African-American quarterback to win the Super Bowl out of the Grambling State University, the place where everybody is somebody with a fee sheet. Doug Williams has moved on. He coached collegiate ball. Now he's back being an executive in the National Football League. And he also does some speaking engagements, some other things. Moving on, we got the kitchen, Big Nate Newton, one of the members of the greatest offensive line ever assembled, the 1990s Dallas Cowboys. Nate Newton is a graduate of Florida A&M University. Got one of the another bros up here, Robert Mathis from the NE chapter, Never Enough, Never Enough. Outside linebacker Russian from the Indianapolis Colts, graduate of Alabama A&M University. Moving on, we have Greg Lloyd of those vaunted Steelers defenses of the 1990s. Greg Lloyd is a graduate of Fort Valley State University and he had a long, great NFL career. Now we have John Stallworth. Again, John Stallworth is a 4-time Super Bowl champion of the 1970s Pittsburgh Steelers, and he is a graduate of Alabama A&M University. Now, most of these players played around the golden age of HBC football, which ended in the 1970s. While many of the players still went to the NFL in the 80s up to current times, that large pipeline decreased due to the rise of the SEC and other predominantly white institutions and their conferences after integration, who focused all their activities and efforts into getting the black athlete from historically black colleges to integrate with them. So they built, it was a facilities arms race where a lot of these schools just focused on building facilities, again, to attract the top black athlete. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back. We'll move to the next portion of our show. Again, I'm Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101.
The Chicago way.
Please stop and listen, because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Jamar Harp, and again, this is Sports 101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here, we like to talk about the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective, using the lens of history in the past, present, and the making. Please get social with Sports 101 and the litany of other shows on SportsZone Chicago by following SportsZone Chicago on social media. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, we need everyone to download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found on the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now, before the break, we talked about the HBCU football and some of its history and its last golden age in the 1970s. Recently, we're seeing the second golden period of HBCU football, and a lot of people are nervous about this. If you look at today's modern society, social injustice and so many other issues have been problems of people of African descent for a long time, often since many of us have stepped foot on these shores. Recently, pro and collegiate athletes have joined the social activism fight and begin to protest and speak out more on social issues involving the African American community. Monkey see, monkey do. This has had a domino effect in the collegiate ranks and coaching for HBCU athletics, in particular long teams. Right now, some of the big name coaches we have are historically Black colleges and universities with long-standing NFL ties will be Eddie George at Tennessee State, Deion Sanders at Jackson State, Hugh Jackson at Grambling State, Tyrone Wheatley at Morgan State, Sean Gilbert at Livingstone College, and many other coaches who have NFL associations decided to change the narrative of quote unquote being second class or second tier, because the common perception is, again, after integration with all the flight to majority institutions, historically Black colleges are looked down or less than versus the other institutions that make their money and butter their bread with African American athletes. So there's a lot of people deciding to make this change and trying to shift the bar, get that bar of equality. If you know what I'm talking about out there, that 1940s information, and try to level the playing field with predominantly white institutions in regards to not only recruiting, but in games, winning games, and swaying the top athlete back home, per se. Recently, Jackson State and his head coach, Deion Sanders, have been kicking ass in recruiting and taking names. Coach Sanders, he signed the number one player in America, Travis Hunter, of the ESPN Top 50, and we saw the backlash from that when he signed and the way he did it. People were burning Deion's jersey from Florida State because Travis Hunter was supposed to go to Florida State. They were saying the kid made a mistake, and these are major media figures, people on national television saying this. So here's a video in regards to some of those issues, and we'll hear Coach Prime speak on that itself.
Deion Sanders, the head coach of Jackson State, Pro Football Hall of Famer. He hit 348 in the playoffs in baseball for his career, by the way, on the Goodyear Hotline in the postseason.
Prime, we got your face on TV, baby. That's what we said we were going to do. We came through.
That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted, man. I just wanted equality. That's all I wanted, equality. Hey, y'all are my favorites, man, because I get up and work out in the morning, so y'all keep me going, man. Yeah, and Keno, I've been loving him for years. Jay, you that dude. And Max, come on, man. You know you second to none, man. You the host with the most.
So, Prime, man, and I'm not even going to use the word flip because it wasn't even a flip. It was simply, as I said before, they allowed you to come into the household, something that they would not do in the past, to be able to communicate with them so they can understand what is at stake for their son, not only academically and educationally, but also from an athletic standpoint, that he would be put in the best position to succeed on the field as well as off the field with you. How were you able to get that done, though?
Well, honesty, Key, I'm straight up, man. I shoot straight. I don't lie. I don't placate. I don't promise your kids bells and whistles. I'm not going to say you're going to blow up on the NIL. No, man, you got to come in and put in work, do your job, and the rest is history. But you got to work. So I'm a straight shooter. My coaching staff did a phenomenal job on even getting it to that point so that I can come in and be me. But we just shot it straight, man. We just really ain't promised nothing that we really can't make happen. And the first time I met the kid, I said, if you come here, you playing both ways, right? I ain't say if. I said, when you come here, you playing both ways, so you got to get your butt in shape. And this kid studied me, man. He's smart. He's smart. He studied me. He knows my life. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Deion, I'm just saying, when Deion Sanders says that to you, anyone could relate to this. It means something different than if anyone else in the world says that to you.
It does. And the reason that is because it's prime.
Every roster is 70 to 75% African American, man. Who you think are getting these kids anyway? So the only difference in this scenario is I'm actually the head coach. I'm going to get them along with the staff, but I'm the head coach. That's the only difference. And I'm not going to say we flipped him. He just wanted to do what he did. He came to our homecoming game. That's the last place you want to let a recruit go to if you don't want to lose him. Come to an HBCU homecoming? Oh, my God. When he saw how we got down at Jackson State and how genuine, they were in there for the pregame speech. They was in there for postgame. So they knew how we got down. Then I think Shador, my son, the quarterback, really took him around and showed him around town and everything. And the rest is history, man. But really, the mother, the stepfather, the family, we was 100 with them. We just shot it straight.
Prime, I got to ask you this. As a African-American head coach, somebody with your pedigree at a HBCU, when this goes down, there's a lot of flack from the old guard about NIL and just pay many amounts of money and all this kind of stuff.
We ain't got no money.
To a school like,
we ain't got no money.
Can you just address all the stupidity out there for me, please?
$1.5 million. I heard $1.5 million, and I heard Dave Portnoy from Barstool. That's the biggest lie I've ever heard. You know what that is? That means we kicked your butt. We took what was ours, and now you got to make up an excuse why. Ain't nobody get no $1.5 million. I wouldn't pay my son $1.5 million NIL. How I'm gonna coach a guy that's making more than me?
Yeah, wait, hey, you were wrong. You know how it is, man. You much like you just said, Prime. You beat them at their own game, so now the only way to do is try to smear. It's like a smear campaign in politics.
Exactly.
You win, they lose, so now they want to attack your credibility and your character and who you are as a football coach of a major university. I want you to tell me a little bit about Travis's ability on the football field and how he compared to some of those that you've been around in high school and everything else.
Key, this kid, Jay, just like if you saw somebody, dribbling and shooting and doing their thing, Key, he got that it. And he got that 1-2.
Yeah.
You know that. He got that when it's in his hands. He's electric. When he's in the secondary, he's aggressive, good skill set. Technique is adequate. We got to tune there to fine tune it. But I can't wait to see him on grass so I can see really what he is. He's both ways now and doing a superb job, and I plan on using him that way. But I can't wait to see really what he is. But when I tell you he got that it, he got that it. He got that when he touched that rock, when he touched that ball, you get up. He got that kind of thing.
So so DT, Dennis Thurman is your defensive coordinator, and having you and DT teach him, did that factor into his decision to join Jackson State?
Yes, and Kevin Mathis, who played 10 years in the league,
That's
which
right.
is the
Kevin
secondary
Mathis
coach.
is there too.
Yeah. Not only did that factor in, but this kid studied me. Like, this kid loves fishing. Like, come on, man, you from the hood and you love to fish. I got you, baby. That's my thing. It was just so many synergies that was unbelievable. And Mama don't play. And I just think a lot of people approached it wrong to Mama. They went wrong. They went sideways. And once you mess up with Mama, it's a wrap.
Prime, I got to ask you, a lot of people, are trying to make these arguments. Well, where is he going to get exposure? And I keep saying, you got most of the exposure in the world right now. I mean, I'm watching everything that you do all the time. What are the benefits to young men being a part of the exposure that you have for their own visibility and their own brands?
Well, every day it's a camera on me right now, whether you know it or not. Every day we shooting a documentary. We shoot a documentary with Barstools, and that airs. I think going into next season, we've already did year one, but the exposure is crazy. We played on television, I think every game but one. Shoot, if you got to be crazy if you don't know nothing about Jackson State right now, or you hadn't seen us get down.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube.
All right, again, that video was brought to us by ESPN, and basically we want to break down and unpack what Coach Prime said. He talked about relating to mom and doing things that the other coaches couldn't do. He referenced before he was a head coach, or most African-American males were head coaches. If the predominantly athlete at these institutions are African-American males, who's bringing them in, the assistant coaches, he alluded to that. He talked about why people were upset because he's a head coach now and he's getting top talent. He was doing it, before as an assistant coach and just someone that's a former player. In another interview, Coach Prime stated that there was many times in the past where Florida State would call him and ask to talk to players so they could sign with Florida State, and he would do that on behalf of the school because, he's an alumnus and one of their best players, if not the best player to ever play there. Now, since he's recruiting against Florida State, these same fans are burning his jersey, calling him racial epithet, just calling all types of crazy names. This young man, Travis Hunter, disrespecting him, saying that, he messed up his life, all because of the decision that he made. And Coach Prime said, at the end, we're just taking what's ours. We're kicking butt in recruiting and people don't like it. He also stated that he's there to make a complete change. So I believe his goal is to get Jackson State in a position where they can compete against SEC teams. Because, again, the SEC in the 1950s and 60s, there was no black players. Now, just like an infomercial, wait, there is more. Coach Sanders, he also landed the number 6 receiver in the country, Kevin Coleman, out of St. Louis. Now, Kevin Coleman, he also made history. He committed on national television at the U.S. Army All-American game. And I'd like to show you his commitment now.
You also have signing day that's coming in February, and there's going to be some announcements leading up to that. Matter of fact, you can expect, and you heard it here first on the pregame show, Saturday, January 8th. Just keep your ears to the ground.
Keep your ears to the ground. There you go. Keep your ears to the
ground. Janara Meeks is here, Dad Kevin Coleman, senior grandparents, and everybody else has come down for this final declaration. This is a big moment. Exactly. All righty. You were inspired by OBJ to be at this game. You said he has the type of play that inspires you to be here. Now you have your moment like he did many years ago. We've got these hats on the table, Kevin. So between USC, Arizona State, Florida State, Oregon, USC, I mentioned that one, and Miami, and we have another hat, Jackson State, on the table. Where are you going to play your college football?
First off, I want to start off by thanking God and my family and my friends that came along. With that being said, I think every school, they gave me the opportunity. I'll be taking my talents too.
Go ahead. Kevin, pick your hat. Where are you going to college?
Hey, put it on me. Hey, I'll be taking my talents. Play with prime time.
And to Jackson State to join Deion Sanders, building his program. So why Jackson State?
Prime time. Why not play with the best?
Okay. And what have the conversations been like between you and Deion about what you'll be able to do with him?
He inspired me. Why not be taught by the best? He played both ways. He did everything I want to do.
All right.
Make history, make the change.
All righty. Well, Kevin, congratulations on your declaration. Headed to Jackson State.
Hey, somebody take my picture.
Well, this is a wild moment.
Now, right there, that video comes from the pregame show. And if you analyze that, the announcer, he announced all the schools. And then stated, and another school, Jackson State. So automatically in his verbiage, he placed Jackson State separate from all other schools. If you listen to what he said all the other schools, name after name after name. And then he said, and one more, Jackson State. So after Mr. Coleman puts his blazer on and picks Jackson State, he gets asked, why Jackson State? No other players get asked that when they make their decision. And his response is, why not play for the best? So again, you have people that subconsciously are talking down on these kids, but however, signing on NBC, national TV, that's great exposure, not only for Jackson State, but the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, and the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conferences. So hopefully all the recruiting to go up. Mr. Coleman is the number 58 ranked prospect in the class of 2022, and the second ESPN 300 commit for Coach Sanders in this class. There's supposed to be more. The Jackson State Tigers have the highest ranked recruiting class in FCS last year, and the highest ranked recruited class in HBCU football history, and the number 55 recruiting class out of all schools in the country. And they're definitely on pace to beat that this year and hopefully crack the top 25. Signing day is this upcoming Wednesday. We're going to have a great signing day show for you, and we're going to pack not only what Deion Sanders does, but the rest of these schools do as well. Our next gentleman we like to talk about is this young man right here. This is Jamar Stewart. Jamar Stewart is one of the top unsigned recruits left in the 2022 recruiting class. Supposedly the Georgia Bulldogs, Texas A&M, and Miami are his final three. Most people think this is going to change for signing day. Stewart had an upcoming visit this past weekend at Georgia, and Georgia expects to make a final push. The reason the picture is up there because that picture is associated with a tweet. And again, you never know what these kids will do. Coach Prime has said he got two more coming, and he may be one of them. Jamar Stewart, this picture right here, on his own accord, he put this up. And on his Twitter, the words behind it, the captioning behind it was, well, you're committed to a Power 5 and Deion Sanders gives you a call. So he posted that on his own accord. No one forced him to do it. And you see his picture. He's looking like he's very interested. Also at the Polynesian Bowl, he was seen with other Jackson State recruits, horse playing in the ocean. And a lot of people think that he's going to come to Jackson State along with the next gentleman that we're going to talk about, Mr. Harold Perkins. So I want to show you a video of Mr. Perkins right here, and then we'll break down Harold Perkins. Harold Perkins is a number one outside linebacker and a sleeper signee for Jackson State this Wednesday on signing day. All right, so right there, excuse me, that was Jamar Stewart putting in work on the defensive line, and you can see what he brings to the table. So, hopefully he's one of those surprises Coach Sanders is talking about. Now let's get to Harold Perkins, the number one outside linebacker in the country.
Yeah.
All right, so Harold Perkins, again, is the number 1 outside linebacker and the sleeper pick for Jackson State University this Wednesday. He's a 5-star linebacker who recently decommitted from Texas A&M. Remember, Texas A&M is known for their stellar class this year and how much money they spend in NIL deals. His uncle Alvin announced recently that he's decommitting from Texas A&M. He's a number 4 prospect overall in the 2020 class, and again, a number 1 ranked outside linebacker. At 6'3" and 210 pounds, out of Cypress, Texas. He had only recently committed to the Texas A&M on January 2nd at the Under Armour All-American game, so they thought he was going to be a top pick. He's originally from New Orleans, but moved to Cypress, which is right outside of Houston, in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina lost his family's home. His mother, Bertha, moved the family to Texas, again, for a better life. And again, that's what they were looking for. Jackson State is also rumored to be courting 6'7" national championship tight end Darnell Washington from Georgia. He's in the transfer portal as well. Some people think it's Eric Gilbert, former LSU star tight end his freshman year out of Georgia, but I really think it's Washington. So in closing, we'd like to discuss these few things. You have to believe that your ice is colder. At some point, as African Americans, we have to inspect and look within ourselves and understand that, what we want, you have to separate and build it like everyone else did in this country. And until you do that, you're going to be in the same situation. Please don't ask for different people to do things that you can do for yourselves. Using the quote from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come, such as Coach Prime and what he's doing at Jackson State, with Southern University, Tennessee State and its indoor practice facility, Prairie View A&M in its new stadium, Alabama State in its new stadium, and other schools that are investing in themselves. Remember, that's how these other institutions sway the vote of the student athlete after integration, by building these $1 million facilities and getting all the bells and whistles to accommodate someone who would have been fine and was fine without all that stuff for years and years and years. And the last thing is, you want to keep your wealth in-house. The only way you grow politically, socially, and economically is by keeping your wealth in-house. Student athletes are physical capital, intellectual capital, and social capital. And by keeping the best and brightest of your own at your own schools, you ensure the wealth and byproducts and residuals of all three of those components: the physical, the mental, the social, as well as the spiritual. So by doing these things, not only you would increase the prowess of your schools, but you can put yourself in a position, if everybody's recruiting the same athlete and your school is a historically Black college, then if you had the same facilities again, you should be able to secure these athletes. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports 101. Again, I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on social media, on Twitter at Coach_Harp412 and Facebook under Jamar Harp. Please sure you get social with SportsZone Chicago and follow SportsZone Chicago on social media as well. SportsZone Chicago can be found on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, at Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but more importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app. The SportsZone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Thank you for tuning in this week's episode. We'll see you next week again for another episode of Sports 101 every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. This was a special episode this week because today is January 26th, and on January 26, 2001, was my probate. I was already a member of the organization, but it was my probate to the world as a neophyte in the mighty Tall Side chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. So shout out Fall 2000, the Fifth Element, Dean, Julius Wendell Russell, and all the other bros that helped us, get to where we're at now. Root to the Qs. Again, thank you for turning in to Sports Zone Chicago. I'm your host, Jamar Harp, and I'm gone.